Dearest Internet, the following is a product of the unfiltered views of some guy. I have gone to great lengths to express myself in the most frank manner possible, though admittedly, I'm using a certain modicum of restraint in respect to the platform and in the hopes of remaining within the domain of artistic expression. What you are about to watch may be offensive to some viewers. For those of you who feel they may fall into this scope, please click away now. Await. Individual viewer discretion is advised. Let us begin. The natural world contains many mysterious phenomena and dangers to mankind. In our evolution of thought, we fabricated stories to explain these occurrences. Woven within myth and legend are entities of potentially malevolent intent. Many of their narratives contain similar motifs from varying cultures of different time periods. Much of these qualities are vampire-like in nature. The concept of a vampire is exemplified in a broad scope of instances. I find the mythos to be quite intriguing. Theirs, along with the broader domain of the supernatural, angels and demons, werewolves and witches, the eternal struggle between good and evil, light versus darkness, and somewhere in the middle resides humanity, wrestling with the duality of our nature, the pursuit of a virtuous existence opposed to the influence of our baser instincts. I find all these and so much more to be codified within the vampire mythos. Though it wasn't always myth or meme, it, along with the broader influence of evil, was taken in earnest. Throughout the Middle Ages, documented in art and literature, are the copious instances of the witch hunt, in which tens or even hundreds of thousands of people were burned at the stake, found guilty of the practice of witchcraft. Untold others were tortured in efforts to garner a confession. In 1589, Peter Stubb, the werewolf of Bedburg, was publicly executed after confessing to having made a deal with the devil, allowing him to transform into a wolf. He was reported to have killed countless victims over the course of 25 years. His skin was removed, his appendages broken, he was decapitated and then cremated. Grando is believed to be the first documented case of vampirism. The earliest published description of the Grando case is from Valdvassar's The Glory of Duchy of Carniola in 1689. He was alleged to have died in 1656 due to illness, but reports of him endured for over a decade after his death as a vampire, terrorizing surrounding areas until his grave was exhumed and the corpse decapitated. French Benedictine monk Augustin Calmet wrote at length regarding the validity of such entities as vampires, angels, and demons in response to the reports throughout Europe in the 18th century of revenants and apparitions. Calmet was one of the most learned men of his era and admired by Voltaire. Though his research was ultimately inconclusive, one hypothesis attributed these phenomena to the casting of black magic by witches. These superstitions continued well into the 1800s, with documented cases of mass hysteria in New England and parts of Europe, such as Transylvania and Serbia, prompting wary denizens to exhume corpses for telltale signs of vampirism and execute those suspected of being a witch. Human remains from that period have been found buried with a rock shoved in the oral cavity and a stake through the heart. The Mercy Brown vampire incident, occurring in Rhode Island, USA, 1892, is one of the best documented cases of exhumation of a corpse in order to perform rituals to banish the undead manifestation. Hers, along with the dubious Crogland Grange vampire, which is likely a retelling of a fictitious Victorian-era serialized Gothic horror story, or perhaps the other way around. At the dawn of the modern era, many of the infectious diseases which afflicted humanity were associated with vampirism. While science would refute this, the general public would cling to superstitions, bolstered by the acts of the burgeoning notion of the serial murderer. These individuals seem to encapsulate the qualities of the malevolent beings of myth. Occasionally, their modus operandi resembled that of a vampire or werewolf. They are too numerous to list for the scope of this video. Their crimes are too ghoulish to describe. Fritz Harmond, dubbed the Vampire of Hanover or the Wolfman, due to his predilection for the biting of the throat, was a German serial killer sentenced to death by beheading in 1924 for the murder of at least 24 youths between 1918 and 1924. An earlier example is the noblewoman Elizabeth Bathory of the Kingdom of Hungary, alleged to be responsible for hundreds of murders, mutilations, and the torturing of young maidens, and legend has it, bathed in their blood in hopes of sustaining a youthful look. This association of the vampire myth with some of the more taboo aspects of human nature can be discussed at length, and it's beyond the scope of this video. For me, the capacity of humans to inflict such harm on one another, along with the many instances in which God, or nature, misfortune, whichever way you describe it, smites mankind, is a morbid wonder of mine. Much of the literature of the 1800s seems to reflect this predilection of people in general, before you go judging me, some guy. It was in 1896 when Dracula was published, written by Bram Stoker. The creatures contained within its pages portrays characteristics which exhibit an amalgam of attributes from myriad entities of myth and legend. The femme fatales who would lure lascivious men with the promise of carnal pleasures to their doom, like the sirens or the lamia. Shapeshifters like the werewolf. Beings who encapsulated the fear of infant mortality, like Lilith, who described in Jewish text would steal newborns of unsuspecting mothers to eat their bones and suck their blood. Witches who would invoke demonic forces in order to practice black magic. Stoker seems to draw on history and myth to fabricate a being perhaps inspired by an actual historical figure. Vlad Tepes, infamously known as Vlad the Impaler, though known to most of the West for his reputation for cruelty, seen here in this 1499 woodcutting, allegedly dipping food in the blood of his enemies before consuming it. To the Romanian people, he is a national hero. History tells his story as a man who took the surname Dracula after joining the Order of the Dracul, along with his father, Vlad II. The order was started by Sigismund von Luxembourg to model earlier orders of the Crusades to defend Christianity from Ottoman Turks. This is the greatly abridged historical account. The literary account has the Count boldly entering a mythical school of black magic and Transylvanian folklore, known as Scholomance. Legend has it that only about 10 students are admitted at a time. They are shielded from sunlight for a duration of 7 years. It is said to be presided by the devil himself, where he teaches the scholars the weather-controlling ways of King Solomon, the casting of spells, and the language of all living things. These accounts are subject to many interpretations, but it would appear that the price of admission is that the devil claims one of the scholars as his due, tasking them as the weather maker to ride a dragon that could never be allowed to land, as doing so would cause the dragon to devour a significant portion of humanity. The mortal count, who claimed to be descendant of Attila the Hun, dared to enter this school, and perhaps was the scholar of dubious honor chosen by Satan, as he would perhaps metaphorically as a dragon go on to ravish humanity wherever he set foot, oft-times accompanied by a storm. He is weakened in sunlight, has no reflection, much like the old superstitions surrounding witches, as he can cast spells, allowing him to control animals and hypnotize people with his gaze, making him in essence a male witch or warlock. He can shapeshift similar to a werewolf, can control the weather like the legends of King Solomon. He is immortal due to the Faustian deal made with Satan for his soul, similar to the legends of Peter Stubb, ultimately damning him in the process, making him undead or a revenant. His corporal form is possessed through demonology, evidenced by his aversion to the cross, a tactic used for centuries by the Catholic Church in exorcisms. He can be killed only by the stake through the heart, beheading, and immolations, much like the executions of heretics, documented throughout history. This archetype, popularized by Stoker, is influenced by the superstitions and literature of his day, based on earlier history and myths, would inspire the cinematic horror genre of the 21st century. This prolific branch of pop culture would spawn a plethora of films and other media, rising and waning in popularity.
We'll tear your soul apart.
my relationship with this genre has evolved throughout the years, as I hated and avoided fear brought on by fiction and mythology early on, and yet subconsciously yearned to be exposed to ever more increasingly frightening subject matter.
I see dead people. I'm so scared.
Like a drug, I sought to get increasingly better highs from without overdosing, but avoided at first due to its association with immorality and by extension damnation. The concept of a vampire has been known to me as far back as I can remember. Oft-times it was rendered in a way best described as campy, a word borderline synonymous with vampire movies. Count Dracula and all his derivatives were depicted to me as a one-dimensional cliché. In my memories, I vaguely remember seeing the preview of Bram Stoker's Dracula on television. What stuck with me to this day is the visage of Gary Oldman, which I found chilling and incipiently horrifying. It was circa 1992 when it happened, as that was the year the movie was released. It would be a box office hit, with a budget of $40 million grossing over $200 million worldwide. Francis Ford Coppola's Construction is the only vampire movie to win an Academy Award for Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hair, and Sound Editing, and is considered the best adaptation most faithful to the source material, while at the same time paying homage to its cinematic predecessors by using only live-action special effects void of CG, making it as timeless as the mythos it portrays. I wouldn't see it that year, nor the year after, or the year after that. It would be 10 years later, circa 2002, when I would finally view it. It was during a time of cinematic discovery for me, as newfound freedoms granted me access to movies previously unavailable. Late nights I'd rent movies from Blockbuster or Hollywood Video I'd heard about, but never got around to watching till then, due to high levels of graphic violence, sexual content, taboo subject matter, or all of the above. Bram Stoker's Dracula was amongst them, along with Pulp Fiction, The Silence of the Lambs, and Basic Instinct, to name a few others. A decade had passed since I first saw the preview for Dracula, and in that nostalgic time period for me known as the 90s, vampires remained the staple in pop culture, and have ever since. This film is phantasmagorical in its imagery, but where this movie really shines for me is the acting. I feel as though each thespian fed off each other, no pun intended, to try to act out the best portrayal they can, and it shows in the end result. Coppola does a brilliant job in bringing the pieces together to fashion the embodiment of the entity of which the peoples of the past feared, and of which Cal May tried to validate or refute in his research, but was ultimately inconclusive. Bringing elements from actual aberrant human behavior, the gothic horror literature of Stoker's day, and the mythologies of the past, to tell a story that encapsulates our deepest fears, taboos, and the darker aspects of human nature. But as it happens, so many vampire movies are subpar and tacky, which is why for me a good vampire movie is so coveted, and why I'm particularly fond of Bram Stoker's Dracula. So long ago, when I first saw the trailer, I scarcely knew what a profound effect it would have on me. I've seen so many vampire movies since then, but it's the only one amongst my favorites to win an Academy Award. But it isn't perfect.
So humid tonight.
The movie has a few mistakes, and the acting has been criticized both for the casting of Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder for their poor British accent. But every attempt at making it good seems to have been made, from the acting to the special effects and the wardrobe, inspired by some of the art of the past. Few vampire movies are regarded so highly, in a genre not taken seriously as films. Perhaps in the future, a movie will be made about vampires that will be nominated for and win multiple Academy Awards, including Best Picture. One can hope. Well, hello there, stranger. Feels like forever. I realize I've been gone for a while. Thank you for watching some guy talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula. This video was brought to you in part by the public domain, from viewers like you and subscribers. If you enjoy the content, please leave a like or subscribe. If you'd like to leave a comment about what you'd like me to talk about in the future, feel free to do so. Tune in again next time as some guy talks about Wolverine.